Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Humanitarian section of State of the Map EU, and for coming to this first talk, MapSwipe Today and its Future in OpenStreetMap. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of explanation. So my name is Nicole Siggins. I live up in Hamburg, Germany. I'm on the governance team at MapSwipe. This talk was initially intended to have Benny from HeiGIT, Benjamin Harefoot from the Heidelberg Institute of Geoinformation Technology is also part of this talk. Unfortunately, Benny broke his foot last week and couldn't make it, so we have a little bit of an unconventional setup where Benny is here in front of you, here, and he's going to be also advancing the slides. So it's a little bit different. Hopefully it's not too distracting. And yeah, we're really happy to be here, and I'm super happy, Benny, that you can make it remotely. Next slide, please. Okay, so before we begin, I would first like to get a feel for the room. Who here has heard of MapSwipe but never used the tool? So if you've heard of MapSwipe but never used it, please raise your hands. Okay, I see about 4 people, 5 people. And then who here has actually used MapSwipe to map? Okay, wow, a significant portion of you, that's great. Who here has actually created a project on MapSwipe? Oh my goodness. 4, 5? Wow, amazing, great. And then who here in the crowd has actually never heard of MapSwipe? Okay, also a significant portion, so great. Let's start there. Next slide, please. And then what is MapSwipe? Next slide, great. So before I get into the deeper technicalities of MapSwipe as a tool, I'd first like to explain where it sits in the wider OSM ecosystem. So MapSwipe is both a web and mobile application used to collect geoinformation, but it does not connect directly to OpenStreetMap. So some consider the tool to be more of a supplementary tool because the data it collects can then be used to set the stage for creating projects that do actually connect to OpenStreetMap. So for example, a project on the HeiGIT tasking manager. Next slide, please. If we zoom in here to see where MapSwipe sits, we can see that it's in the humanitarian section of OpenStreetMap. So most importantly, MapSwipe was developed as part of the Missing Maps project and is used primarily for humanitarian purposes. So in the zoomed in image, you can see that it has some overlap with existing tools in the wider OpenStreetMap ecosystem, but it really does serve its own purpose and has its own specific use cases. And we'll speak a little bit later about how MapSwipe might eventually become its own direct OpenStreetMap editor and why that could be important given its specific space in the wider system of OpenStreetMap. Next slide, please. So MapSwipe is a tool that was initially developed in 2016 under the umbrella of the Missing Maps project. This is a project that was started in 2014 that aimed to get places that weren't represented on any digital map into OpenStreetMap. So what you see on the screen here is a representation of a Find Features project on MapSwipe. This is where a large area is put into the tool, and then volunteers essentially swipe through where they see the feature, so that could be buildings or roads, other signs of life, and then whatever comes back, this much smaller area here, can then be put into a tool like the HeiGIT tasking manager to get that area into the map. The tool is inspired by services like Tinder, so like where you could get this feeling of swiping or doom scrolling, but with maybe some more positive benefits, so not feeling really badly about yourself and your dating life, but being able to contribute to a good cause. And the result is a reduction in mapper fatigue. So before, mappers were looking at this really large area where there were no people living, and then they started, kind of being demotivated. So this makes things much quicker and much better for the volunteers and really much better for everyone. So, and while the core project remains focused on humanitarian aims, it's also an open framework, open source. It's up on GitHub, and you can use it for other things as well if you'd like. Next slide, please. Some important bits about MapSwipe, again, it's not currently an OSM editor, so it actually has its own separate database, and it actually has a validation system built in. So that means at least 3 users look at each task, but this can be adjustable in the back end. And again, it's both a mobile phone app and a web app so that you can use it in the browser. Next slide, please. So let me talk a little bit now about the current projects that we have at MapSwipe, things that you can do today with the tool. Next slide, please. So the first is a Find Features project. This is like kind of the classic example of a MapSwipe project. And this is where users are looking for some kind of feature in the satellite imagery. So that could be buildings or roads, mobile homes, airline strips, solid waste. Basically anything that you can see from a satellite has potential to be put into a MapSwipe project. Next slide, please. We also have the Compare Dates project type. This is where users can compare before and after scenes to indicate some type of change. So it could be really helpful in situations where there's before and after in a disaster, or if you want to see how a city is built up or diminishes over time. This is actually one of the least common MapSwipe projects, mostly because it's a little bit difficult to find the before and after imagery that you need for your specific use case. Next slide, please. We also have the Validate Footprints project type. So this is where users look at existing OpenStreetMap data. And this can actually be pulled directly from the Hot Tasking Manager. And this can help humanitarian organizations really quickly see which areas might need to be remapped, especially if people have mapped maybe not so well, or if the area has changed over time. Next slide, please. We also have the View Streets project type. This is actually relatively new. It launched of March of this year. It's available on the web version of MapSwipe only, and it's considered a little bit of an experimental project type. And in this here, you can see that you can actually look at imagery from ground level and then indicate something in that imagery. So for example, you could say, is this road paved? Or do you see solid waste in this image? Or what type of building is this? Which is really kind of cool and helpful that you can see things so closely. You can see this like a 360-degree image that the person can look around. And yeah, it's very cool. Next slide, please. We also have the Check Completeness project type. This is also brand new. I believe it launched something like 3 weeks ago. And this is almost like the inverse of the Find Features project type, where instead of looking for features, you're actually looking for the absence of OpenStreetMap information. So this here, you can see the blue is an overlay of the OpenStreetMap information. And what the volunteer does is instead tap the areas where OSM is not present. And then that area can then be put into something like the HUD Tasking Manager to get those gaps filled in on the map. Next slide, please. And then last but not least, the current project type, this is also brand new, also launched about 3 weeks ago. This is the Assess Images project type, funded by the American Red Cross. And in this project type, the person who creates the project puts in a folder of images. So this could be drone images, it could be single street level images. And then there's a question to the volunteers. Basically, do you see this icon here in this image? There's also the option to add an additional file to the project with machine-generated items. So for the image over on the right-hand side, and then the task of the volunteers is to validate if those machine-generated images actually appear in the image itself. And this was inspired by Mapillary's verification projects type, which I think came out a few years back. Next slide, please. Some real-life use cases of where MapSwipe is helpful for humanitarian organizations. Next slide, please. Is first, this year, is the Democratic Republic of Congo Ebola outbreak. This was a project by MSF. Some folks are here in the crowd today who worked on this project. So on September 4th, 2025, the DRC Ministry of Public Health declared an outbreak of Ebola. And so there was very quickly an activation. The first MapSwipe projects were created on the 5th of September. And then there was a huge amount of swiping in the community to get these projects through. And then over the next 23 days, there were 16 projects that were completed over about 20,000 square kilometers that were checked for buildings. So this larger brown area here is the area that went through MapSwipe. And this area was then put onto the HUD Tasking Manager to get this information into the map. And those were also completed very quickly, which is a huge success. And the response efforts were used for things like delivering supplies and vaccines to contain the disease in this relatively poorly mapped area. And this project type, this campaign used the Find Features project type on MapSwipe. Next slide, please. These images show people cheering the first patients that were leaving the center after they recovered. And the World Health Organization declared this outbreak ended on October 20th, after there had been no new use cases since September 25th. I mean, yeah, that's right, September 25th. Great. Next slide, please. And the next recent use case was the Myanmar community-led damaged buildings mapping. This was a campaign that took place between May and October of this year, so also ended quite recently. And this was led by the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team's Asia Pacific Hub. This was a compare project on MapSwipe. And so for every area where there was open post-earthquake imagery available, they used the compare project to basically narrow down to areas where there was perceived to be damage using before and after images. And then this information was then used to create projects dedicated to this on the HUT tasking manager. Next slide, please. So then the mappers would look at the before and after imagery using either ID or JAWSM, and they had detailed instructions here on the bottom left corner of which tags they should use depending on what they saw in the imagery. Next slide, please. Okay, a little bit about MapSwipe's structure. Next slide, please. So MapSwipe is both a tool, but it's also a community. So we actually have an elected governance team. You can see some of the members up there, including me and Benny, and Amar and Eureka, who are also in this room today. And we have an active community on Transifex to do translations. We have an active Slack community. Because we are a project and not an organization, we also need a fiscal host. So we use Open Collective. That helps us collect donations and also pay invoices for things like maintenance. And we also have a bi-weekly working group that anyone who is interested in MapSwipe and wants to contribute to the community can attend. Next slide, please. So what's next for MapSwipe? Next slide, please. So the first thing is that for our View Streets project, in the beginning, we were only able to use mapillary imagery in this project, but we are exploring successfully, I think so, using panoramics imagery in the project. If folks here don't know panoramics, it's like an open source version of mapillary where anyone can upload from their phone images from street level into it. And this is very exciting, and I think it's going to debut actually pretty soon. And yeah, this is also fully open source. You can self-host. It's got active community development. It's got a federation of instances. Check it out if you haven't. I think there's actually someone here at some point giving a talk about panoramics.
That happened in the last session.
It happened in the last session, so hopefully some of you were there. Next slide, please. We also have been working on a new project type called conflation. This is a project type where you can compare OpenStreetMap information with another data source. So for example, Microsoft Bing building footprints. And in this project type, there's two things that could happen. So if there is only one building outline, so like the top image, the volunteer is asked, like, how well does this outline match the shape of this building? And then they can say yes, no, or they're not sure. And if there is two buildings, if there's two outlines, the volunteer will not know which one is OSM and which one is the other data source, and then they can indicate which one fits better or neither of them. And again, like all MapSwipe projects, each of these tasks is assessed by at least 3 volunteers. Next slide, please. We've also been contemplating some big questions this year, thinking about what we want to do with MapSwipe and where it should go and what problems it can help solve. Next question, please. Next slide, please. The first one is if MapSwipe should actually become its own OpenStreetMap editor. Next slide, please. So for example, here in the View Streets image, in the View Streets project, let's say you're asking a question like, what is the surface of this road? And if at least 3 people, with the built-in validation, if at least 3 people say the same thing, would there be an opportunity to then have those attributes of that existing feature be entered into OpenStreetMap? So it would kind of be like the Street Complete app, if anyone has ever used it, but like a remote version of it, because you're not actually physically there, but you're like physically there with your imagination using the street level image. Next question, next slide, please. Thank you, Benny. The next question we've been thinking about is, Should MapSwipe help validate AI-generated building footprints? So next slide, please. Excellent. So we've been thinking about this project that's kind of loosely called FairSwipe, which would be a combination of the conflation project mixed with the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap's project, OpenStreetMap team's project FAIR, which is like an AI-generated learning model that hopefully gets better and better. So in this case with the conflation project, the opposite data set would be FAIR, and then OpenStreetMap compared, but again, the volunteer would not know which is which. And then another idea is to actually connect the back of MapSwipe directly to FAIR so that the feedback from the volunteers can go directly to FAIR to hopefully improve the data set, to then go directly back to MapSwipe to then get validated again and kind of in this circle to get, hopefully that FAIR would then be like the best it could be with the help of humans. Next slide, please. And the third question we're thinking about, which is kind of a doozy, is kind of a combination of this. So if we had MapSwipe and FairSwipe together to potentially also then push this information that is validated by humans directly to OpenStreetMap. Next slide, please. So this is kind of a prototype of what it could potentially look like. So at the very top, you have the validated AI features. So this is the feature that has been validated by at least 3 humans. And on the left-hand side, you can see that first we check OSM, then you go down the left-hand side, and if there is not currently an OSM building, then the building could be created as a change set within OpenStreetMap. In the center, you have that it checks, and then if it sees an existing building, then there could potentially be like maybe a merging of the geometries or the tags. And then on the far right side, you have that maybe there's some kind of conflict, maybe multiple buildings, something that just doesn't seem right, and then this would be flagged to basically be manually corrected. It would not go directly to OpenStreetMap. And again, this would all be accessed by at least 3 map swipers. And if you look at the bottom left corner, this is like the actual hows are definitely like to be determined. This is an open discussion that will probably last some time. Next slide, please. So we've been thinking quite a bit about, is this something that we want to do at MapSwipe? We know that there's, a lot of concern in the OpenStreetMap community, also within our community, about using AI and machine learning models in mapping. There's questions about intellectual property. Could it be stolen by companies? AI is terrible for the environment. What if we train an algorithm and then get sold and then suddenly we're no longer important as mappers? Or, if we if we start using this project to kind of do work that typically beginners do, then are we kind of ruining our community for beginners and it's more difficult to introduce newbies to the project? These are just some of the things that we've been thinking about. Again, this is a very open discussion. And we might end up coming to the conclusion that we don't want to do this. And this isn't a good idea. So yeah, just some things we've been thinking about. So just to summarize, how MapSwipe is now and how MapSwipe could be if we do move forward with both of these ideas. So in the upper left-hand corner, so right now we have absolutely 0 direct connection to OpenStreetMap. If we decide to make MapSwipe its own editor, then we could directly add attribute information to existing OpenStreetMap features using the ViewStreets project. And then the second one in the bottom left-hand corner, right now the validation is performed manually by volunteers, and then it's actually added to OpenStreetMap through a completely separate process because, again, the tools are not connected. And maybe what could happen is that the validation would be performed and then would be confirmed by the humans before being committed as part of an extension of the conflation project, otherwise known as FairSwipe in this case. Some questions that, next slide, thank you, Benny. Some questions that we've been thinking of is like, is any of this a good idea? Is adding existing attributes to current data a good idea? Is it a terrible idea? And then if we do something like this, and there are more than one person validating the information, then who is actually credited as making the edit, right? Is it the last person? Do we kind of put everything towards some kind of like MapSwipe bot that then that's the one that makes the edit? We're curious to hear from the OSM community if you've done anything like this, if you know of any projects that have done something like this, if you have any feedback on this. And then lastly, if we are going to kind of take the steps to eventually have human-in-the-loop validation of machine learning models that then gets pushed to OpenStreetMap, like when and if ever, is that a good idea, and how do we do it in an ethical way? And then also make sure that the data is of good quality now and continuing. So Benny, before I kind of say thank you, is there anything else that you would like to add from your side, from HeiGIT side?
No, I think you did a brilliant job, and I'm curious to hear the questions from the audience.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, everyone. Happy for any questions, comments, concerns, or feedback. Ralph Ayton, I'm very curious about your question.
Right, yes. We mapped quite a lot of previous MapSwipe projects on the tasking manager. What we have found when validating is that the map is mapped just within the task square that you have produced. However, the validators have been finding buildings and roads that have been missed in between those task squares. How confident are you going forward that using only 3 people to validate an item is going to catch all of those going forward? And how can we improve that situation?
Okay, so the question is, when OSM validators have been looking at the output of MapSwipe using the hot tasking manager, they have noticed that sometimes all of the buildings don't make it into the project. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, and then how confident are we that our current method of 3 people checking it, are we? That's the question. Excellent. So what I can say, and then Benny, I'll open it to you as well. I know that when I have made projects on the hot tasking manager, sometimes I don't include the buildings on purpose, depending on how difficult I want that project to be. So sometimes I'm really targeting beginner mappers, and so I make sure that I only put buildings from MapSwipe into a project that is at least a meter from every other building around it, does not have any tree cover around it, basically has very clear imagery to make sure, like if I'm training a room of beginner mappers, that they are going to be able to make the best first edit that they can. So that may be some of what you've run into, Ralph. And then secondly, in terms of the 3 mappers, this is basically just the average that we settled on for the default. So we ran some tests with less people looking and more people looking. And it seemed that after 3 people, it didn't really change that much. So that's actually the default. But if there is an area that is more complicated, or we're worried that maybe 3 people isn't enough, you can actually up it in the back end to many, many people. I'm not sure what the cap is. Benny, maybe you know, but I think I've done like 30 once, at least. Benny, I'll throw it over to you, and I'm also going to try to fix this sign.
So I think you're right, like 3 is the absolute minimum we should do, right? So we always have to do 3, and ideally we would do more. So if you do 3 or 5, 5 would be better. But if you go from 5 to 7, the difference is not that big anymore. So maybe 5 would be an even better number than 3. But of course it comes with the cost of your project takes longer. And most of the time, so often, MapSwipe has also been used in this rapid response scenarios, where the first project that is created is MapSwipe, and only after a day or 2, we have already the data and can continue mapping in the task manager. So I think the best solution would be we just grow the people that use MapSwipe, and can always say we go with 5 people, we have more confidence in our result, we miss less buildings, and the ones that we find, we are more confident. So that would be ideal. I think at the moment it's a trade-off of how fast we can map with the size of the community that use the app.
Thank you.
Yes. Maybe there's time for one more question, just because I know there's no time between these talks. Do you have a question?
Kind of
follow-up to this.
Yes.
So, you're saying that you're very careful with the making sure that the buildings are clear. Maybe there could be like a graduation at that kind of early stage of saying, these are easy buildings to do, and this might be a difficult one that's more advanced. And then you would then have like 2 sets of data that come out of it. And that way you then, potentially not have some of those kind of more difficult buildings getting missed.
Yes. So the comment is, when making projects for beginner mappers, is there, potentially we could almost split it. I'm not sure how to summarize this. We can split it so that some of the data goes to the beginner mappers and then others could go to advanced. So that's actually something that can happen. So the way that I've done it personally when I've created the projects, I basically use a tool in JOSM to cut out the beginner areas and then save those as one file. And then I have the advanced mapping that I can save as a different file. And that goes into an advanced project on the Hot Tasking Manager. Does that help clarify? Okay, cool. Okay. Sam, how much time do you need? Okay, in the back there.
Hi, so I'm originally from Southern Africa, and I do a lot of remote mapping in Southern Africa, and it's more a sneaky request. I know a lot of buildings get mapped and they're fantastic, but I would love to see more tags, as you mentioned, like road service types is one of my pet ones, because driving around Africa, the surface of the road is one of the most important things. So I'm really pleased to see that you have the feature of adding surface types.
Yeah.
I'd love you to do more of that as a project.
So it sounds like you might potentially be interested in using the Street View image project.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Also, aerial imagery, you can often make out what the basic road type. Is it a paved road or is it an unpaved road?
Absolutely. Yeah, excellent. So I don't want to take time away from my wonderful friend and colleague, Sam Colchester, who has the next talk, but I do want to say, before wrapping up, that there is a QR code. Oh, why am I speaking to this? There's a QR code here that you can use if you want to check out MapSwipe, either the web or the mobile version. And also, I made an OSM diary post about this talk. This is actually the second time that I've given this talk. The first time was at State of the Map US back in June. And I would really love if folks commented on this and we can get a discussion going. I actually received 0 comments from State of the Map US, and so I don't know if that means people are disinterested in this, or if you have no opinion, or if you're so opposed that you won't even comment. But I would really love to hear from anyone, all of you, about this to get this discussion going. Thank you so much again. Thank you, Benny, so much for calling in remotely, and we can set the stage for our next talk.